Okay, thank you for having you back in the room, Jacobi, for the next talk. So the next speaker is working as a senior architect and open source developer. He is well known also for his work in NSClient+++ and for his obsession for Lego. And he will tell us today something about the NSClient++ and the REST APIs. So as I heard, it will be very heavily curl obsessed. So have a nice and warm welcome for Michael Medin.
Sorry. Can you hear me now? Oh, now I can hear me. So that's a good thing. I think the word we're looking for is boring to describe what this presentation is going to be like. Or as Michael Fredericks told me in the previous session, nobody want to look at curl outputs. That's what I got for 45 minutes. Great to have you here. I literally have nothing else. So there's no introduction. There's no nothing. I'm just going to show you curl. Yeah, that's it. I do have, because this is apparently my 10th year, I do have some giveaways for you guys in the form of Swedish candy. So first question gets candy. And the interesting thing about these is they have this city in Sweden where essentially they do this candy. So people stop by and buy candy. And then they sort of handmade them so you can sort of look at them when they're making them. So we stopped there this summer with our kids. And essentially, they make the candy and the kids look at them and then, they get to taste the candy and then they buy a lot of it and walk out the store. So the kids get the candy and they're like, ugh! I was like, shut up and eat, it's free candy. and apparently it was strawberry champagne flavored candy. And yeah, that's sort of, sorry, that's why I brought this up. That sort of brings us to this. So what we have here is essentially gin tonic, strawberry champagne. We have vodka energy, apparently Red Bull is trademarked. And mojito as well as rum and coke. So if you want to get drunk early, ask a question. And for those of you who feel that curl is boring, you can always try to figure out the movie references. There might be some. And there might be some sort of context to the pictures somewhere in this. But essentially, I'm going to show you curl output. So yeah, that's all I have. And if you want to play along, I have some machines out on the internet. And if you have curl installed, you can go to those machines and you can run the same command that I'm running if you want to play along. So essentially, if you go to osmc.medin.name, you will have the same URLs and the zip file with some stuff. So if you want to hack along, feel free to do that. Otherwise, I'm going to start off. And we're going to start by talking a little bit about how REST sort of works in general, but more specifically how it works with NSClient. So the first thing we're going to do, if I had a prompt, would have been, yeah, sorry, demos. My prompt is below my start menu. Now my prompt is still below my start menu. That sucks. Oh well. Can you get rid of the start bar somehow? Hide. Yeah, now we've hidden it twice, and it's still not hidden. Can we make it smaller? Move it somewhere? Yeah, we can put it at the top. Great, thank you. So the first thing we're going to do is start off by deleting our ini file, which I apparently already did, and then we're going to stop the NSClient service. And this is why this is going to be fun. Let's stop NSCP. Great. The next thing we're going to do is enable the web server in NSClient with a password so we can access it. And we do that by running, let's do this, by the way, is the way it should be. And the CP web install, and we specify a password. And I'll go with hello, otherwise I'll be confused and nothing will work for the rest of the presentation. And essentially here we can, specify other things like allowed host and, whatever you fancy. But we'll go with this, and it will then tell us that we can point our browser to localhost 8443, and that the password is hello. It's great, so you remember what you just typed in. And we apparently created a new configuration file, right? And by default, the access is only from localhost, so that's not useful for you guys. But the machines in the cloud, they are allowed or access from anywhere. Next up, we're gonna start NSClient. And while we wait for that, we can launch curl. And we can enter some fancy curl commands, right? Magic, isn't it? now this is true magic, yeah. And essentially what we have here is -s is for not showing any output except the actual payload. And that's quite important because we're going to deal with JSON, and if we get a lot of debug output into JSON, it's not going to be JSON, so then the JSON parser is going to mess things up. And the K is essentially, I didn't buy a certificate for localhost, so we need to insert that to trust the certificate, and then we specify the username and password. So if we hit this URL, we get the usual, JSON gibberish. And unfortunately, this is usually how everything starts out. So if you're going to do something with REST, you need something along the lines of a Python JSON formatter thing, right? And hitting enter gives me nothing, apparently. Yeah. So, super awesome. And here's the first interesting thing about the REST API, because the REST API, if they're done well, is kind of self-describing. So this means that if we hit the root of the API, it will sort of tell us where we can find the rest of the API. So we don't need to go to the documentation or anything like that. We can just hit the root, and it will tell us, if you want information, logs, modules, whatever, these are URLs to go to. And let's see. I thought we were changing slides. Apparently not. Right, so the first thing we're going to do, and let's do it the correct way so we can read, is look at the info thing. And that's not really funny because it tells us that it's NSClient and it tells us which version it is, and that it. But then we have another one of these magic URL things at the end, right? So it says version_URL, and apparently we can go elsewhere to get the version information. So let's try that. And you sort of get the idea here, right, that this is what we're going to do for 45 minutes. So it's not too late to pop off to the other session. And there's a lot of these curl commands I'm going to show you. Awesome, right? So now we know how to sort of navigate the REST API. The next thing we need to figure out is how pagination works. Because sometimes you get more than 5 lines or something like that, and then you might want to sort of split them up into logical units. But for this to make sense, we need to add some sort of log messages to NSClient, because right now there's nothing, hopefully, unless it's broken, and then it's going to be a long session, because then nothing will be working. So I've done that, or I've prepared that with a bat file that will essentially run a couple of curl commands to do logging. So essentially now we're sending log messages to NSClient, so technically it's a log server, right? So, off you go with the elk stack, in you go with NSClient, right? Perhaps not the best idea. But what we're doing here is the same curl thing. We just swap in the verb for post, which means we're going to create something. And then we specify whatever we want to create here at the end. And what we are creating in this case is a JSON thing. So there's a lot of \quote, \quote, \quote. But if we sort of discard all of the \quotes, what we have is level warning and message warning 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, what we can do here is go back to our REST API, and we can hit logs, and we'll get a really long list of log messages, which in itself is not very useful. But the question here is really pagination. So how does that work? And to find out how that works, we need to drop the whole JSON stuff at the end, because we can't parse JSON. Because we need to do some magic here, and that's add the -i option. I means show us the response headers. So what we get now is beside the JSON gibberish at the end, we get some stuff at the top, right? And that's the response we got from the server. Now, most of this is not very interesting. 911 characters, apparently. We get a 200 OK. But we also get this link thing. And the link thing is how pagination works in the NSClient REST API. So essentially, what it's telling us is, you don't need to figure out how pagination works. You can just grab the link you got in the request to go to the next page. So again, we don't really need to do anything except copy-paste. And that's good for me, because that usually works better. Now, unfortunately, because we're working on a Windows machine, we need to escape things. And they've gone with the little control character for escaping things, which it confuses the hell out of me. But who am I to argue? So let's move to the top of the screen and try this out. So essentially, now we're going to do this per page equals 2, because otherwise it's going to be too long. And then we're going to do control ampersand, page equals 1. And we get, oh yeah, sorry. We're also going to do this bit at the end. Oh yeah, that's the drawback to macros. Yeah, the header thing, sorry. It's really helpful that it just tells you that, hey, sorry, couldn't parse it. It doesn't tell you what it couldn't parse or anything. It's just, you're out of luck. So here we have the first 2 lines, and then obviously by going to page 2, we can sort of step our way through the logs. The last thing we're going to look at before we end, no, not really, but before we actually do something useful is authentication. The way authentication works in NSClient is essentially you have a bunch of these grants, and in this case what we're saying is that the info endpoint, we can get everything. You can say, info.get.version, and we will only be able to get the version from the info endpoint. So let's try this. Let's do it like this first. NSCP web add role minus role limited minus grant star, right? And feel free to proofread me, because that's usually the problem. The next thing we need is a user, so let's add one of those as well. And that's worked pretty much expected, and I told you to proofread me, and you don't nothing. That's not good. Password foo role limited. Interesting, right? You get to hear me type. It's like magic. Let's also restart NSClient. Because, oh, yeah. Proofreading. This is a team effort, right? Open source, community. Please help me out. Right. No. Is running. That's really quickly. Let's redo this. It takes a long time to stop, so it should presumably take a while to start, right? Yeah, that's better. This is going to be awesome. Anyway, when we talk about pagination, when we talk about authentication, the stars are a good way to grant something. But it's obviously insecure, because in subsequent version we might have other information that you're accidentally granting. So you sort of have to decide whether information might be insecure or not. But generally, I think it's a good idea to do the star thing. Otherwise, you'll have to list a lot of privileges. So what we're going to do now is try this out by using yay command, and we're going to hopefully remember to swap out the user. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Foo, right? Yay, works, right? But if we now go to something else except info, it will not work. And this is because now we're not getting JSON back, because we get an HTTP error. So 403 not allowed, right? Great. So with that, we've pretty much covered the bases, right? So let's do something. I don't think it's more interesting, so I'm not going to even try. But essentially, what we're going to do now is sort of change the story a bit and go from the high-level stuff to the more detailed stuff. So this is when the Black Ops team is coming for you. And things turn nasty, right? And what we're going to start looking at is logs, because we just did that. So that's super awesome. And I don't have to type much, except change the username. Admin, what was it? Hello? Yeah, thank you. And I get nothing. Oh, yeah, we restarted. Thank you for reminding me. So did I have the command for adding log messages? There we have it. Super. Yeah, now we just get to watch my computer do magic stuff. It's beautiful that way. Right, but what we can do with a log endpoint is actually filter stuff. So we can say, hey, let's just give me the errors. And let's add one of those JSON stuffs at the end. And we will just get error messages. Magic, right? You can never imagine something so powerful, right? You know, you can just ask for error messages and you get them. Yeah, I'm blown away myself, to be honest. The more interesting bit is modules, because NSClient consists of a lot of them, and those are usually what provides the features of NSClient. And currently we just have the web server running, so currently we can't really do anything with NSClient, right? So the only thing we can do is ask for log messages, which is not that funny. But let's go here instead. Oh, wait, sorry. Did that work out? No. That's where we're going to be, sorry. And what we can do is do list, say all equals true, and we will get a much longer list of modules. And this is a bit too long, so now we can use the fancy find string command, which is, by the way, the best command ever. It's like grep, but it works on Windows. You know, blew my mind when I found it. You know, I've been looking for it for like decades, and I was like, it was there all along. It's just that they named it badly, or arguably better, because it's finding strings and not grepping people. But that's me for you. So essentially here we have a list of all the modules, right? And the interesting bit is that if we go to a module which we haven't actually loaded, let's remove the find string while we're at it. We'll see some really magic stuff. Yeah, you're going to be blown away. Apparently it works when it's incorrectly spelled as well, or incorrectly capitalized, I guess is the word. But the interesting bit here is here we have again these URLs, right? So we have a load URL, and we have an unload URL. And if you're doing something on the online stuff, please don't unload a web server, because then party is over. Because there's nothing. So what we can do is we can go to commands/load. And now we hopefully have check system with a capital H loaded. So let's see if we have that. So let's list the loaded modules. And yay, 2 modules. Life is good. Thus far, you know. And yeah, like forgetting to move the slides. So now we have a module, so we can actually use something. So we can, you know, have functionalities. Check system provides things like checking the CPU level, the memory, that kind of stuff. System-related things. So let's sort of move on to the concept of checking things, and that's done with queries. So now we can list queries, and you know we get the beautiful JSON output again. It's like a page of gibberish, and JSON is really great to work with because it's so easy to read. It's much better than XML, for instance, or something like that, right? And this will give us a list of, queries we can run. And this is probably the usual queries you've been using if you've been using NSClient. So essentially people tend to run check CPU for some reason, and they run check memory. No one uses check network. Some people use check PDH for checking weird performance counters that never works. And that's pretty much it. Uptime is also used sometimes. But that's Windows for you. If you're monitoring Linux systems, then you usually check a lot more. But let's sort of move on to one of these checks and see what we find. So we can, again, we have the URL for them down here. So we can just go to check uptime, for instance. And I forgot the whole JSON thing as always, which is why I have it macroed. So let's do this, and you'll get it slightly higher up on the screen. So this will tell us that, what the check does. In this case, it's check uptime since last boot. It tells the name and the title. They're essentially the same. But the more interesting thing is that we have execute Nagios. And on the flight here, I realized that, shit, they're going to sue me. I can't use execute Nagios. So I'll have to execute Nagios parentheses, trademark parentheses. So I'm going to patch that when I get back. Or maybe rename it check Izinga or something like that. We'll see how that pans out. But essentially, we have check Nagios and we have check not Nagios. And when you're checking Nagios, what you get is the usual, string back. And when you're checking not Nagios, you get JSON back. So you sort of get to pick what you prefer. And generally, if you want to parse it, JSON is better. If you want to read it, Nagios is better. So let's try that out. And let me get slightly further down so I can actually read. So we have commands and execute Nagios. Super awesome. And you're probably all saying that, hey, that's not a string, that's JSON. You lied to me. Bastard, right? And I am a bastard, but not in this case. The reason why we're getting JSON back is because we asked for it. So we can, but we got it slightly parsed. It's just a bit messed up. We can actually tell the client that we want to have text back. And the way you do that, let me do this first so that we can read a bit, is by going here and add a header. Header. Accept text/plain. And this tells us that we want to get text back, not JSON. No JSON whatsoever. And it essentially, oh yeah, exactly. No JSON whatsoever. Hate it every time. Gets me. So essentially what we have is, check NRPE over REST, right? That's super awesome. So now we can just throw away check NRPE and everything is happy, right? Yeah. Unfortunately, we get to the next slide in a bit. So what we can do now is move on to, I now can't read anything because I have an overlay, so I'm see what I'm actually going to do. I'm cheating, as always. So if we run execute instead of execute Nagios, what we'll get is the performance data is split up. And that's actually useful if you want to do something with this information, because parsing performance data is actually complicated. So I think if you want to automate this or bring it into some other system, you probably want to go for this one, because then you can grab your whatever JSON library you have and just sort of walk your way through it. But now we get to the not so pretty part, because there is always the not so pretty part. And that's the reason why this is not going to replace check NRPE, unfortunately. Because how do you enter query parameters on a curl command? Well, you end up, first of all, we need to put quotes around it, otherwise we need to escape pretty much everything. But then you end up with things like, warn equals load 40%25, because that's how you encode the percentage sign. Where do we have a percentage sign? Oh, it's there. So, and then you end up with, awk, what do we have? Crit equals load above 20. Yeah, I get you. Thank you. Now you're at it. Let's see, %25, right? And then we'll have show all, I think. Show all and filter equals none. And this is not funny, to be honest. I mean, this sucks. And that's why we're going to have a check rest command or something like that. The quote? Oh, you need a quote at the end as well. That's kind of limited. Yeah. Super awesome. I'll give it about 2 seconds. 40% load. Oh, yeah. Great. That's the other one. I was thinking when I was preparing this that I shouldn't have different commands. Yeah, now I got to showcase that. So here we have a whole bunch of stuff. And if you're going to parse all of this and try to figure out the graph or something, you're better off using the JSON output. But if you're going to run this from something, you're probably not going to want to escape all your percentage signs and things like that. So most likely, you're probably going to stick to check NRP or some check NSCP web or some command like that. The other thing that people tend to use NSClient for is scripts. So let's hit the scripts endpoint and see what we get. And let me just back up a bit. Scripts. Awesome. We get nothing. That's always a good thing, right? It's helpful at least, because then we know what's wrong. Nothing. And the reason we get nothing is because currently we have no one who is providing script support. We have, check system and we have the web server, and those doesn't provide script. So essentially what we need to do is use one of these fancy load commands again. And I'm going to see if I can type this up really quick. Modules, check external scripts, right. Commands/load, correct? Hopefully. So let's go back to our scripts endpoint, and all of a sudden we have something. Great, right? And now we get this, URL where we can actually access these scripts. And the reason why we need to have the little /x thing at the end is because we have Python scripts as well, and there is no correlation between them. They work the same from a REST perspective, but they have different endpoints. So if you want to have the same scripts in the same place, it will actually work if we prefix them. Right, so let's see, where are we? Script/x. And again, we get nothing. And that's because there are no scripts, right? But we can remedy that as well. But let's first just see what scripts we have. All equals true. And then we get a list of all the scripts we have in our file system. We could obviously have done, just dir scripts and gotten the same list, but it's more fun to use REST, right? And that's always a good thing. Right, so what we're going to do now is actually try to upload a script. Yeah, this is going to turn out great. It's one of those where I get to type a lot. So essentially we have scripts, and then we specify where the script is going to be. So that's why we have another script here, because we want to place the script inside the script folder, right? We don't want it in our root folder. The script is checknew.bat. And then we need to put it, so we need to change the verb. And then we need this guy, data, binary, at, and our seed folder. OSMC, really? Isn't it? OSMC, this disturbs me a bit. Seed, check, new.bat. The worst thing is that if you upload and the file doesn't exist, curl won't give you an error. It will upload an empty file. And that's no response from module. Sorry. My bad. Super. Yeah. I think so, because it shouldn't echo it. That's that's probably why the whole tab thing is not working. And I have stuff in the way. Let me remove the quote, or I'll be confused for the rest of the slides. And now we're at the... Yeah, this is awesome. How are we doing for time? So, yeah, check new, add as, check script, blah, 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 yeah. And what we have now, if we move to our scripts folder, is, yeah, we can more folder. Dir scripts. We hopefully have the script here somewhere. Yeah, we have. Awesome. And it's not 0 bytes. That's a good thing. And essentially, if we go back to our query thing we had before, we can actually just start running it. We don't need to do anything. So we just upload it and it works. But we need to check new instead of whatever we have. Awesome, right? Everything is awesome. Let's just move on a bit. Yes. So we can execute the script that we just uploaded. Magic, right? Now's the part where I'm going to demo the settings. Unfortunately, I haven't really gotten there yet. So that's going to be for the hackathon on Friday, I guess. There is actually a settings API, it's just that it's buggy. So I'm not going to go there. Instead, we're going to go to Python scripts. And this is, again, when the story turns slightly differently and we find the hero of the day, right? And everything just becomes happy. And I'm actually not so bad on time, which is scaringly good. So we had a simple Python script here. And I'm going to do like that. It'll be slightly easier to read. And the reason why we have this is sort of to demo the 3 main functions that you have in a script that's running inside NSClient++. And the first thing we need to do is bring in the log function, because we're going to log some stuff. Then we log something in the root scope. That's essentially when the script is loading. Then we have a main function, and we have an init function, and we have a shutdown function. The reason why we have 3 functions is init is when the script is starting, shutdown is when it's stopping, and the main function is when we're running it from command line. And that's actually quite useful, because that means that we can now go and do NSCP, if I can spell, Py, because it's Python script, execute, minus script, and let's see if I can find the script. And what we'll get here is, first of all, the root scope. You probably shouldn't put a lot of stuff there, but you can if you will. Then we have the init function, and it gives us a plugin ID. And this plugin ID is actually important, because whenever we want to talk to NSClient, it's going to know which plugin is talking. So we need to send that along. The aliases is essentially if you want to load the same script twice, then you can have different aliases for them and different configuration and weird stuff like that. Then we get our main function, which was sadly empty, and we get shut down. Now what we can do here is, if we had a script that monitors databases or something like that, we could, have a command here, add schema foo. And those arguments are passed to your script, so you can provide a nifty little installer for your script or a nifty little command line interface. And all of these commands can also be used via the REST API if you're so inclined, if someone wants remotely to install your script. So the next thing we're going to do is add the script, so it's actually being used by NSClient. And to do that, we use the Python script module again, but add, if I remember correctly. And now I should have not removed the script, so I wouldn't have to type. Great, and we need, let's do NSCP Test. And what we have here again is the root scope when the script is being started, the init function, and now we have a script alias, which is simple, but that's just because the default alias is the name of the script. And we get no init main function, because we're not running it from the command line. We also got no shutdown function, and this is actually interesting because this means that the script is still running. So whatever we want to do, it will do it for the duration of the lifetime of NSClient. If I exit NSClient++, then we get the shutdown function. So the script is running from start to finish. So if you want to keep state or do some background processing or something like that, that's totally fine. Right, so that's it. So now we're going to something slightly more interesting. And this is one of those pretty pictures. And since I'm not having slides, I have them as background images instead. And essentially what we're going to do here is we're going to do a script that allows us to check which users have logged into the system. And we're going to try to do that in as few lines as possible. So essentially the way this is going to work is that we're going to have our Windows machine, and we're going to have our check event log module, and we're going to have the Python script module, and the web server, and as well as curl, right? So if we start off at this end, and what's going to happen is that whenever someone logs in, Windows will send an event log to the event log, or a log message to the event log. We will pick that up in the form of our real-time filter called login. That's going to be sent as an event down to our Python script on event handler, and that's going to update the user variable. So it's going to say that user X has logged in once, twice, 3 times. On the other end, we're going to have someone executing curl to run this check, and then we're going to run the check users check at the bottom. It's going to, in turn, run the check users function inside the Python script, and it's going to access the users variable. So essentially, you have an asynchronous communication, right? We have the event log writing to our Python scripts, and we have the REST module accessing the Python scripts. And all of this, or for all of this to work, we need to have the actual event data. And this is how an XML version of an event log event looks. And what we're going to do is look for this target username thing. And once we find that, we're essentially just going to log it. So this is going to be the cheap version of the script. So let's look how this script looks. OSMC seed, osmc.py. And the first thing we have up here, which I can see because I have my start menu there, is we're importing some stuff from the NSClient namespace. Settings is to be able to configure the event log module. Registry is to be able to say that we want to have notifications and we have functions and things like that. And core is essentially for loading the event log, but it's for talking to NSClient. Then we're loading Python's rather shitty XML parser to be able to parse the event log data from the Windows event log. Then we have our users variable, which is where we share the state, right? And then we have our event handler. And the event handler gets the name of the event, and it gets metadata. And metadata is essentially a hash map, right? Key value store. And in the key value store, apart from things like event ID and message and things like that, we also get the XML data. So what we can do here is take the Python magic function to parse the XML for us. And then we need to specify the namespace thing because it's XML, right? That's awesome. And then we can essentially just enumerate all of the data items in the event log. And whenever we find one that says target username, or well, whenever we don't find one, we will just continue to the next one. But when we do find one, we will see, do we have this user already logged in? If so, set the count to 0, and then we increment the count. And this is pretty much all the code we need to parse, read event log data, and do some sort of structured processing with it. Obviously, we might want to do something slightly more fancy than just grep for the name. But again, this is a simple script. The next thing we have is our function that is providing the check functionality. And we just need to reset the performance data. And then we enumerate all the users who's logged in. And we append them in the form of performance data. And then we just return that with a fancy little message and the 0 response code, which is OK. Last thing we have is the init function. And this is where we sort of tie all of this together. So in the init function, we get an instance to the registry. And this is, again, where we have to specify the plugin ID to sort of say, hey, we are plugin 25. And then we can say, whenever event log is emitting an event called login, send it to me, or send it to my on-event function. And I can also say, whenever someone is running check users, send it to my check users function. And then we provide a little fancy description for it. The last thing we need to do is set up Windows Event Log Checker. And to do that, we need to use the settings. And then we essentially said that, enable real-time event logging. We add a login, or a filter called login, which reads the security log. It looks for event 4624. And it's send that as an event to other systems. And then we just load check event log and we're done. Right, so let's see if this works. So let's clear the screen and py add script. Let's see. Ooh. Py, sorry. Thank you. Pair programming, awesome, right? Right, so what else do we need to do? Yeah, we need to reload NSClient because it's running. Someday I'm going to implement so you don't have to do that, but not right now. Actually, we're going to do that later in the presentation, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Start NSCP. So, let's see. Sorry? Really? That's weird. Why would it do that? Makes no sense. That scares me. Never done that before. Right. So what we're going to do now is use the netuse command to log into my machine. G501JW. Let's delete it first, because I've probably done this yesterday. Apparently not. Oh, I can't spell. That's apparently what's not. Yeah, well, maybe I haven't. User task user, right? And there's nothing. That's a bad sign. G501JW. Oh, yeah. Thank you. So we're logging in someone else's machines. That's great on this network. Yeah, so I had done it before. Super. Yeah, I've actually tried. So this works, or it worked this morning. Right, so what we have now, hopefully, if we move on, is the ability to run, the ability to run our magical curl command. And let's see if I can type this really quickly. And now, all of a sudden, it was really slowly typing. Queries, check users, commands, execute. We probably want to Python this, right? Damn it. Always too fast. Great, so one user has logged in, and that user was called test user. Super, right? So this seems to work. And just sort of to prove that I'm not cheating here, let's delete the session again and log in again with the wrong, the wrong host name. History in Windows is really fucked up, by the way. It never goes to what you expect it to. Right, so let's see the query. Twice, awesome, right? And the interesting thing here is it's not much code, and we can sort of do a lot of processing with event log events to actually provide useful information instead of just sending it all somewhere.
It says total one user has logged in. Is that the current one?
No, it's one user that has logged in, but he has logged in twice. But you might add that it should be not plural, when it's just one. So I agree with you. It should say one user when it's one. Right, so now it's time for the end game, right? So now we're going to sort of move on. And the story is, again, going to take a slightly different turn. And what we're going to do now is look at another new feature of NSClient that's called zip modules. And essentially, zip modules is just a way to package stuff in a zip file and have NSClient deal with that as sort of a single unit. So to do this, we're going to showcase what a zip module looks like. And hopefully I'll manage this. Great. So inside a zip module, you will have, besides scripts or whatever you want to provide for artifacts or resources, you will also have a module.json file, because JSON is awesome, right? I could have done module.xml and everybody would be like, oh, no, not XML, that's so 2010. So now it's 2017, and it's JSON. I'm like ahead of myself. Next year it's going to be YAML. That's going to be awesome. So we have a name for the module, we have a description for the module, we have a version for the modules, and these are essentially just metadata to be able to find modules. Then we have something slightly more interesting, because this module requires other modules to function. In this case, it requires check system and check event log. So what happens is when we load this module, those modules will be loaded as well, which can sometimes be useful. Then we can also say that, hey, I have a bunch of scripts in my module, and I want them to be added. And there's two ways to do this. The first one, which is slightly more verbose, is to tell it that, hey, we have check external scripts. It's going to run my script. It's going to give it an alias, and we're going to have a command line. Or you can just, here's my script. But then you'll get the default aliases and the default command lines and the default everything, right? We can also run a bunch of commands on start. In this case, we're adding a performance counter that's going to be polled repeatedly, so we can use it for something. We're not going to have time to use it, so let's ignore that for now. But we can do other stuff as well. Right, so let's move on and delete our NSClient ini file and net stop NSCP. And let's essentially restart the whole presentation, but do everything with modules instead. It's going to be super awesome, right? I can't spell NSCP, web install -- password, hello. S?
Double S in password.
Oh, really? Have you changed spelling recently? Awesome, right? This is just as awesome as it was the last time we saw it. Sorry, let's go here and run start instead. Right, so now we're going to get to the interesting bit, because now we can use curl. That's always fun. And I'm going to quick start my curl command a bit here. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to our modules endpoint again, and we're going to create a new module. We do this with post, because post is cooler than put. I'm not really sure which one is which, so I use them half the times. /c top, it doesn't work, OSMC seed OSMC.zip, and let's get these guys together. Right, so let's see if this works. I don't know, we got nothing. That's a good thing. Or not. I'm kind of partial. I think it's just something. It scares me a bit. Probably not working. Queries. What was it? Check users? Execute. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It worked. So let's try the whole login, logout thing again and see if it actually works or if I'm just messing with you. Was it 501? Thank you. Delete. It's kind of weird to delete a session, but maybe that's just me. Wait, user : test. User, right? So let's rerun the command and do the whole Python thing at the end. Awesome, it works. One user has logged in once, not twice. I know it's confusing. Now comes the actual best part. And I don't know how we're doing for time, but I think we're spot on, actually. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I am. This is actually where you should be in awe, because this is actually documented right now. You can go to the documentation site, and what I just said is already there. It's never happened before. Never. You know, I've been here for 10 years promising, you know, lots of stuff that's never, I mean, the Python stuff has been there for 10 years. It's not been documented until now. So please do visit the documentation. Right, and that's pretty much all I had, I think. Or not. So now's the time for questions. And you get the candy. So,
yeah, thank you.
So. Go for it.
Are there any questions?
Not even with candy?
Some requests for candy? So, yeah, a short question of mine. You mentioned the URL for the documentation.
Yes.
You can also query it via curl, or?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely, okay. Nice.
That's actually a good thing. I should have done that.
You can read the documentation with curl, okay. I like to see
actually,
it.
I can't do that here because the Wi-Fi is not working though, actually, right.
I can provide you with
NSClient.org. And yes, what was it? Extending Python. Is that correct? Moved permanently. Oh yeah, that's actually true. Because it's moved here. So you see, yeah, exactly. And if you see here, there is actually, you know, here you have like, yeah, I don't read HTML very well, but settings.save, and you know, save the settings file to disk, or yeah. So yeah, it's totally documented.
Okay. Quite cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh yeah, there's a question.
I would pass on the candy, but thank you.
Oh, okay.
Would you advise to use NSClient on Linux? I know you have presented it, I think, 2 years ago, but I never tried it, and I would
say yes, okay. But you'd probably be the only one. Yeah. But you shouldn't let that stand in the way of trying things out. You know, it might be awesome. No, I would say. Unfortunately, the check system thing is not implemented 100% currently. So things like check CPU would have to be through external scripts, and that kind of sucks. So, oh yeah, that works, and you know, the REST API and the Python thing, and that's totally cool, and it works well on Linux in that regard. The only bit is that check CPU is well, you have an external script for that, which I think is a bit of a shame. Yeah. So feel free to try it out, and I'll give you any support you need, because it would be awesome to get more people on Linux side. And seriously, yeah, okay. If you want, you can get one of these Visual Basic stickers. No. No. That's actually the truth of the matter. It's that NSClient is actually written in Visual Basic. Not many people know this. No questions? No? Oh, okay. I'll have to eat all my gin tonic candy myself then. Yeah, so see, it burns. Like, gin tonic? I honest to God have gin tonic candy. Yeah. Gin tonic. Yeah, sure. Do you want me to throw it? It's hard, so I'll hit someone. No, I'll kill someone. I have a nasty throw, but you can come up later and pick one. Yeah. Well, thank you for your time. That's all I have. Yeah.